to introduce Nancy Eason to you, but I'm going to wait till we have some people join us just for a minute or so. Welcome to Be Well Clinic. I'm Amy Mahaly. This is our Be Well Clinic channel, which is all about having long-term, you be able to come back and notice or rewatch things about health. So we're about empowering and educating, and that's why Nancy is here today. Hello, people who have joined us. The way that the YouTube works, and we use Restream, which means you can chat in YouTube, which just requires a Google sign-in. You don't have to have a YouTube sign-in. It sends it to us, and it takes 15 seconds to get to us. So ask a question, and then we'll see it eventually, and then we will answer it. So feel free to ask throughout, and we'll have time for questions at the end if we need to. I'm just going to introduce Nancy to you. This is Nancy Eason. She lives in the area, has for 40 years. She's a mom and grandma and lots of other cool stuff. I've known her for a lot of years, and I'm very excited to have her come talk. She's talked again in person, but I'm excited to have her talk again so we can send people to the information you're presenting. And what I've asked her to do is talk about how raising her kids was, and just bringing some wisdom from a generation that some of us have missed. So thank you, Nancy, for being here.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and well, first tell us about yourself, and then we'll get into why you started doing things not always at the doctor's office.
Okay. Just about myself briefly, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. And back then, I had measles, had chicken pox. I didn't have mumps. We always felt sorry for the kids who had mumps. But it just wasn't a big deal in people's minds. Nobody was really upset about it. And beyond that, I never missed school. So I just want to put that out there. I would get a cold once a year, and I'd go to school with my runny nose. That was what we did. But I just don't remember kids being out. I remember like big. I didn't hear of the flu. Didn't grow up thinking about the flu like we do today. So those are some things that were different then. Just didn't have any major health problems until as a teenager I developed acne. So that was my main thing, and that I'll describe what happened with that in a little bit. But as far as a child and the way my mom raised me, my parents grew up during the Depression. They were both only children. She grew up in a poor family in New Hampshire. Only child. Whooping cough almost killed her when she was a year old. Not that she was in the hospital, but she just was losing weight and so on. But beyond that, she was super healthy. I mean, my mom didn't start taking any meds until her mid-80s. She's 89 now.
Wow.
And for high blood pressure, finally caught up with her. But when she was a little girl, they gave her cod liver oil in the schools, which I always thought that was cool. And my mom was
so cool.
She still is beautiful for her, but I mean, she was very beautiful. I don't look like my mom. I look like my dad. And she, like I said, was super healthy. She even breastfed us for a few months, which was very unusual back then that a mother would do that. So I've been grateful to her. We all had good teeth, very few cavities, which is important because once you start getting cavities, it indicates widespread, potential issues. But also, just when you get old, those teeth become a problem.
Yeah.
So it is nice to avoid cavities.
Yeah.
My dad, however, grew up in Queens, New York City, only child, but they were more comfortable despite the Depression. His father had his own business. And my father suffered from hay fever, had his tonsils out when he was 4, went to the doctor a lot more often. My mother grew up they just didn't go to the doctor. I remember my great-grandparents in Vermont. I mean, they didn't go to the doctor. It wasn't a social part of their life. Nobody did.
Right.
This is in the 60s. So that changed in the 70s. Saw that happen. And that was because of Medicare, basically. But my dad was raised in a more hospital system. So he ended up as an adult having a lot of sinus infections and a lot of antibiotics for it and a lot of digestive problems. So that's my parents. And my mom never fussed about any of it, our health. We didn't take medicine, occasional aspirin. That's all. I mean, that was it.
Yeah. Is that
Go ahead.
because you didn't have symptoms, or they just were mild, or do you remember like having fevers and things like that?
The main thing I remember, other than being in my room for like a week with measles, I remember it being dark, and maybe it wasn't a week, but it felt like a week.
Of course it did.
And my mom didn't fuss. Was I would get the stomach flu a lot,
Okay.
almost every year.
Okay.
But again, nobody made a big deal about it. It was just something that
Right.
happened.
Yeah.
So just we played outdoors all the time, and even in the winter, we had to stay outdoors. I can remember begging mom, at 10 o'clock in the morning, "Can we come inside now?" Because we were soaking wet from the snow.
Right.
And she'd say, "No, stay outside." And again, we didn't have fleece, but as I was telling Amy, we didn't have fleece.
Right.
So whatever we wore was crappy, and it would get soaking wet. This is Connecticut. The snow was wet. Okay.
Right.
So anyway, that was my childhood. My mom always cooked, and this is something I really want to emphasize. It's not necessarily what everyone wants to hear, but her example of cooking a meal every night, often had salad with it. Most of it was from scratch. It wasn't perfect by my,
What you know
current
now.
standards,
Yeah.
but it was still good, and we were healthy,
Yeah.
and we had plenty of it. You could eat as much as you wanted. There wasn't like, if I wanted more chicken, I could have it.
Nice.
We didn't eat much junk food. We never had liver,
Okay.
or things like that. We had a lot of margarine when I was young, but then she finally switched over to butter.
Good.
But all three of us kids cook. My sister and I do. Even my brother, I couldn't believe it. He was making stock one day. I'm like, "What? You're doing what?" He's like, "Well, yeah, we had chicken. I have the bones." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's cool, Dave."
That's awesome.
So, that example of cooking, I think, is so important. It can be dad, it can be mom, it can be both.
Yeah.
But if you don't cook your own food, it's going to compromise your health. Most of your own food.
And generations too. I didn't think about that, but we do what we learned from our parents,
Right.
and it's going to compromise lots of generations if you or it's going to benefit. Well, let's focus on the positive, right?
Yes,
It will benefit generations if you give the example of cooking, and it's something that's so hard, from what I hear from moms.
Yes.
It's hard to think of in the moment because you just want to do it easy. You're tired. You have so much going on.
Yeah.
But long term, the ability to teach your child how to cook is huge. I mean, it's
Not
a
only
huge
that,
benefit.
Yeah. I mean,
Just the example. You don't have to teach them, right?
Right.
Just the example of it happening. And it's just the thing to do.
Right.
And so then they're going to carry that forward. And that's going to.
And along with that, this is really important too. And it's about education more than health, but that's important. Mental health, emotional health. Having a family meal together regularly, they say, is the predictor of a child's success in life. I mean, and we would talk and yell, like, "What? How can you believe that about the president?" Blah, blah. We argued about politics all the time. But the point is that we had we were, as children, talking to two adults every night. And it really sharpened our brains in ways that being with just your peers in a classroom doesn't.
Right.
So I just want to, if you were to make one change, it would be to cook meals. Don't even worry about anything else I say. Just cook meals most nights, say shoot for 5 nights a week or whatever, and eat them together without devices, without the news, and learn how to talk to each other or yell, as we did sometimes.
Or don't talk to each other well.
I could blame it on the fact my mom's half Italian, but we just did that.
Well, and that is learning how to talk to each other, because you're not always going to get along.
No,
it's a really important point in life that a lot of people miss.
And I also have to qualify, I am from Connecticut. People are more argumentative than they are here. So you probably do fine.
It's true.
So just my main health problem was acne. It as a teenager, very common, but mine didn't resolve, And eventually, as an 18-year-old going to college, my parents decided to take me to a dermatologist. Okay. And it was just on my face, but front and center. Right. Shall they tell them how I responded to it or not?
Sure. I mean, if it's part of your story, go for it.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's very. I mean, for a teen, my heart goes out to anyone struggling with that, or like psoriasis, any kind of skin, thing that mars your looks. And I would look in the mirror occasionally. It wasn't always bad. It would fluctuate, but I'd look in the mirror and go, oh my gosh, it's really bad today. Wow. And then I think, oh God, it's hard to go to school and deal, everybody's going to be looking at me. And then I'm like, well, at least I don't have to look at myself. It's their problem, not mine. And that was a crazy thing for a teenager to think, but it did help me get through it. And I don't know where that idea came from, but the point is I went to a dermatologist and eventually ended up on antibiotics, low dose tetracycline. And I did this for years, which I'm like, why did the prescription kept getting filled? I don't remember going to see the doctor or anything. So
it's low dose. They don't worry about it. They just keep filling
it.
That still happens.
Wow. Well, it's a bad idea. And at the same time, I became a vegetarian. Okay. Of my own volition. I just thought it was cool. And I would cook for myself and in college, some. I did eat eggs and milk and cheese.
Okay.
So I wasn't a vegan. We didn't know what that was at that time.
Yeah.
But I was also an athlete. So, that puts a lot of strain on your body.
Yeah.
Antibiotics took care of the acne. I finally had dates. It was great. But also in college, I had weird things happen. I started getting flus. Like, what was that about? And I even got shingles when I was in college. And as a 20-year-old, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And I believe
back then it's crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of people my age get shingles now.
Jeez.
But back then that was
super unusual.
So unheard of.
Nobody, I mean, I didn't know what it was, and the doctor didn't at first. And then he finds out, oh my gosh, you have shingles. I'm like, what's that?
Right.
Wow. But I believe as the antibiotics lowered my, immune or system, and so my body stopped fighting that, keeping that virus in containment, right? Because it comes from chickenpox.
Right.
So never had a sore throat or an earache as a child either, just saying. And one other comment about my childhood, you rarely heard about a peanut allergy maybe, and it was bizarre. It's like, God, that could kill somebody. We all ate peanut butter,
Yeah.
And then I remember in the 70s, the first time hearing about autism. And I read a book.
Okay.
It was this weird thing, nobody knew what it was. So I just want you to know it was non-existent in my childhood. Nobody.
That's so important to say, because we have a lot of question, right? Was autism just was underdiagnosed or all of that? And it's good to ask people who are around and say, did you know anyone with autism, or
there were probably, we had special ed, and maybe one or two of those kids would have been diagnosed as autism today. But it was just super rare.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it definitely existed, right?
Yeah. It was rare. Okay. So that's kind of my background. Where do you want to go now?
Awesome. Yeah. So, I asked Nancy to share a background partly just because we can tend to look at people who are as good at natural things as she were going to find out she is, and think that we learned that, your grandma must have taught your mom and taught you, and you're just really good at that, and you grew up with it, and I'm jealous and I could never do that. So hearing her background, everything she's going to share is stuff that she's learned. And so the background is important to know who she is, but also to get to know her, right? But it's also important for understanding this is reachable. And I feel like so often we feel that goals are not reachable because we see the outcome of someone's years of hard work. So I just want to emphasize the fact that all these things she learned, she started with knowing what we did when we knew nothing, or less than some of us, right? And so anyway, that is that, and thanks for sharing your background.
Okay.
So
I do want to clarify, I did have the normal childhood vaccinations.
Okay.
Just make sure that's out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So when we get into the second part, which is encouraging moms, encouraging parents, encouraging families, and it's so timely right now because of how much unsteady ground we feel in medical world, and especially in Colorado. So just what is your experience? How did you start? Because I know what you guys don't know, which is she does lots of natural things, and she's very well versed in at least knowing where to look, right, for homeopathy or herbs or whatever. And so how did you start? What was the trigger that made you think I need to do this?
Well, there were kind of two triggers. The first one was, getting pregnant with our first child, and learning about. I had a friend who was a few years older, had already had a couple kids, and she shared with me about what was wrong with the birthing world, gave me some stuff to read. And that started the main journey, of just kind of going, wow, maybe I don't want them to do this or this or this. And by the time I was 8 months pregnant, I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm not comfortable going to the hospital to give birth, but wow, giving birth at home with your first child feels scary as all get out.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a matter of faith. I actually prayed because I needed to make a decision. And in my case, I felt like I was set free to birth at home.
Cool.
So that's what I did. And back then, lay midwives were practicing illegally in Colorado. It was not legal for you to have somebody attend your birth. We did, though. We found someone who was willing.
Yeah.
Especially as a first birth, I wasn't comfortable not having help.
Mm-hmm.
That was the big thing. And from that, I learned about home education. I learned about homeopathy, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. So we did have a successful home birth. And then and I retired from my job. I had been an engineer. And so I'd been making good money. And so this was we knew it was going to happen, but it was a big financial hit.
Right.
So I was working on our budget one day, and I just kept working it. And finally I just looked at my husband and said, honey, what are we going to do? I mean, we didn't have health insurance. Okay. He did, but the rest of us couldn't afford for me or the baby. And it was super tight. And I said, honey, there is no money in here to go to the doctor. If we need to go to the doctor, we have nothing for it. And I said, what are we going to do? And in his very calm, gentle way, he just sat there and thought a minute. And then he looked at me and says, well, I guess we're going to have to learn how to take care of ourselves. And that was even though I'd already had a home birth, I guess it was a new thought to me.
Yeah. Different.
And so we started by learning about herbs and how to use herbs because, well, it just seemed accessible,
Well, because they're around. So this jar you've been seeing in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Is some herbs that her husband gathered.
Yeah. So this was this year's harvest of Osha. Actually, that's going to last the rest of our lives. We won't need that much. OSHA, Osha. It grows wild up in the mountains, up at the high elevation. You have to be careful because it's related to hemlock. So you have to make sure you know where to find it.
Yeah.
So we only go to high. Hemlock does not grow up high.
Okay.
And it's always going to be by water.
Okay.
And we use it for respiratory ailments, like coughs, especially a loose cough. Very helpful. Or if you've got this like tender area, you know how it gets like that?
Yeah.
Before you're even coughing?
Yeah.
I'll use that, and sometimes it'll really break it up.
Nice.
So we learned about that. The cool thing about living in Colorado is that you've got all these different ecosystems, right? You got the plains.
Tons of them.
Got 5 or 6 of them that are within a 2-hour drive.
Wow.
So, and different herbs grow at different altitudes. And we mainly have gathered herbs for respiratory ailments. I'll be honest, we haven't had many other things we've used them for.
But respiratory things are such a tricky thing. Like that lingering cough that lasts forever is just the thing.
And it happens all the time.
It's so common. It lasts the longest. And so that's really huge.
I have this theory that wherever you live, you're going to find the herbs that are needed. So what do we have in Colorado? A lot of people struggle with respiratory ailment because of dry air.
Yeah.
I never had these problems back east where it's moister. Not like this. And things like urinary tract infections are common because of the dryness. Well, uva ursi is kinnikinick. Or it's related to kinnikinick.
Okay.
And it grows here. Jupiter berries are another helpful one for
juniper berries. Cool.
Yeah. So which weren't they don't grow in Connecticut. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They may have something else, but so
and plantain is great for the digestive tract.
Also, if you get stung by a wasp, go find some plantain. You need to know what plantain is. It grows in a yard if you don't spray for stuff, herbicides. And I'll just grab a piece of it, chew it up, and put it right on. I chew it, get it macerated, and then I put it right on and it's incredible. It works. I've done it.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's good for other
I always
things.
forget about it when I get it.
I never forget. I
someone
mean,
else
I
has a bee
found
sting.
it in a park one time for
Yeah.
a kid who'd just been stung, and sure enough, it took care of it. And everybody's like, "Whoa!"
I'm sure if I used it once on myself, especially, I would never forget. But
yeah, we seem to attract these stingers.
oh no.
So those are just some examples. The other thing I found during that time, like a couple years later, was homeopathy. So, first of all, this book here, Michael Moore, is the book that we started with on herbs, medicinal plants of the Mountain West. So it's specific.
Mhm.
My husband also loves the desert, so these are some a similar book in
Okay, for the
that
desert.
you
And
gathered.
Cattail Bob is a local person.
Yes.
And he will do herbal tours. So you can find him on Facebook. And through the summer, he'll come and do a free or donation-based tour. He has books that are herbs that he's taken specific to this area, pictures of all 4 seasons
Wow.
in color, so you can see what that herb looks like any time of the year. And then he has the lookalikes listed. It's the coolest book.
I need to see that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll show you the spiral bound. So those are available. So Cattail Bob is here local, and he'll do tours, or you can get his books. And I love taking that book out and figuring out what that
plant is. Any questions coming in?
No questions yet.
Okay. The other thing we did, and again, we were trying not to go to the doctor, right? So the other thing we learned about was homeopathy, which is much more well known today. This is one book, Homeopathy, Medicine at Home. The one I used a lot when the kids were young is, you can't really, let me see if I find
the title page.
It's called Everybody's Guide to Homeopathic Medicines by Stephen Cummings and Dana Allman. Super helpful for at-home stuff. This is not for treating long-term chronic problems. You need to consult with a homeopath. But for an acute situation like an earache that comes on, or a sore throat or a throwing up or, that kind of stuff.
Bruise, broken bone.
Oh my gosh, so helpful. And now my kids are using it with their kids.
Yay.
And it's superb. I just can't speak highly enough. In fact, can I tell what happened to me yesterday?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, do I have time?
Yeah.
Okay, just as
Fun
an example.
She wouldn't tell me the story before, so
she
has to tell it now.
As you all know, it's going to frost tonight, or you probably know, and I have a big garden, and so I worked hard yesterday bringing in stuff, and I also had done a lot of walking the day before, and I struggle some with my hips, just pain from time to time. It's generally manageable. I finished working, came in the house, and all of a sudden I had such a pain in my right hip joint, right in the joint, which is unusual. I never get that. Yeah. It was like you couldn't touch it.
Wow.
It was horrible. And I was nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this the end? I mean, am I done? Like, what happened to me? What just happened to me?
Hip? Oh,
man. So I thought, before I went to bed, I thought, well, I should see if there's a homeopathic remedy that might help. I didn't have much hope that it would. I took an arnica, but it wasn't an arnica kind of pain. That's a homeopathic remedy. It's also a plant that grows in the mountains. That's what they make the remedy from. But so I looked in my book, a different book that I have on homeopathy, because it talks about everything, not just home illnesses. So he had some stuff on joints. And the one that seemed right to me is called bryonia. Okay. So it was made worse by movement. Okay, that's a characteristic of that remedy. So I took a dose, went to bed, thinking, oh, I'll be okay tomorrow and can get out of bed. I got up in the morning, just like always, and was walking around doing all stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no pain. Wow. Zero pain. And I was in agony the night before. I have no idea if it was that, but wow. I've had these things happen before, and they don't go away like that that quickly. So just,
that's so cool.
It was really cool.
And I'm glad for you that you didn't have to be in pain.
Oh, it's horrible. And so the cool thing about homeopathy and herbal is that these are things you can try for acute ailments at home before calling the doctor. Even with croup, great success with croup, which is scary. Yep. You do not need to necessarily run to the hospital. Run to your bathroom, put on that hot shower, breathe in that air, moist air, and while you're doing it, you're reading for the right remedy. And it worked with all of our children, so they all had croup at least once. Yeah. The other book that really helped me was Dr. Menelson's book.
Okay.
What's the name of it? How to Help a Healthy Child
Child
Despite
Despite
Your Doctor.
I just bought it.
The cool thing about it was I read about illnesses, childhood illnesses, so I could recognize them. And
Mhm.
he would tell you what danger signal, if this happens, you probably should go get help.
Yeah,
You know?
that's helpful.
It was super helpful. And there's
The cutoff point.
there's a couple books like that out now from other people too. So because we have new disease, we have new things that we
Right.
didn't have to deal with.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a good book, but I wish I knew. I have one and I didn't bring it. Can't remember the name of it.
That one or a different one?
A different one.
Okay.
For childhood illnesses that also looks at vaccinations. What to do if you don't vaccinate, how to treat certain illnesses.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe we can.
I think we talked about it, and I think I bought it. So I'll look and see, and text her and see if it's there. And I will. Thanks for the suggestion, Carol. I will put these books that she recommends. I'll type them actually down below in the full description instead of in the chat because they're easier to find, and maybe put links if I'm feeling adventurous, or at least put the titles and the author. Definitely down in the. I'll edit the description.
And let me say something about books. Of course, we didn't have the internet, when my kids were little, which was mostly good. But
mostly good.
We have the internet now, so there's a temptation to think I'll just go out on the internet and look for it. Well, when it's 2:00 in the morning, your kid's screaming with an earache, that's not a good time to be looking for a remedy on the internet. So having a book, number one, if the internet's down, you don't have to worry about it, or if you're away from it for some reason, traveling, right? And they're just the internet is full of all kinds of nonsense, right? And conflicting advice. I think it causes anxiety.
It does.
So I found something I trusted, and these people, it's just a whole different dynamic. It's almost like talking to a person.
And there's when you write a book, there's a responsibility that comes from that book publication that's not really present on the internet. And so there is going to be, it's a safer, not that people who write books can't write lies in books. There are definitely lies in books, right? But
or mistakes.
Or mistakes. But something that's been tried or true that lots of people have used, that's recommended, right? That's very different than just a Google search. So
yes. Yeah. And you read it, kind of shifting my focus here from my experience, but again, life was a little more boring, back then. It wasn't as easy to be distracted. Like you didn't have seasons of TV to watch.
Right. Couldn't binge
commercial free.
The Bachelor.
Yes. And you didn't have games you could play online. I mean, you had to find someone to play a game with, typically. Right. So for us, once my husband helped me see the opportunity in our struggle, it became a hobby,
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun. I mean, it might seem overwhelming at first, but because of the way my mother raised me, I didn't have a lot of anxiety about health. Like, she didn't project fear. She was sort of like indifferent almost.
You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
The old, there's not enough blood. It's far enough away from your heart it's too far away from your heart to kill you. That's what my mom would say.
Yeah.
It's too far away from your heart to kill you. It'll be fine.
Yep. And so I didn't come from that culture of concern.
Yeah.
And so I would just learn as we went, and it wasn't super stressful. Again, we were blessed with healthy children. That's not a guarantee. So, I want to acknowledge that things go wrong. Things can be challenging. So I'm just talking about, very normal life problems, not cancer, not autoimmune, stuff like that. That you're in another ball league.
And yes, you're blessed with healthy children, and that is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And nutritionally feeding your children well and having a good birth with probiotics, because you're not in all those things do also contribute and layer on top, right? And so we can jump in at any point where we are, because some people have kids that they didn't know any of those things, right? All the time, because we're now learning. Like, so many people in the last year are all of a sudden going, hey, maybe I want to do something different, right? So it's okay where you're starting from, and we can always build, and nutritional always helps.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you don't have kids yet, or you're just starting your family, anything you do is going to compound in benefit,
Yep.
even if it doesn't seem like you're doing anything helpful in the moment.
Yep.
Cooking for your family maybe doesn't give you any benefit at the moment because your kids hate your food, you're exhausted, your husband's late, and then you have to do dishes afterwards, right? But the compounding benefits of that are huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 It seems so often in life, the right path is hard at first.
Yeah.
You know, I don't, it's too bad it's that way, but it seems kind of that way to me. Or the better path. I don't know what's right, but a better path.
Path less traveled. I mean, there's a poem about it.
Yeah, there is. I don't want to say it's always that way. I'm just saying
Yeah.
it's interesting. But as you could, if you know it's right, I guess that's my
Mhm.
thing. If you know, you know what, I know this is right. Like I need to lose weight, right? I use that as an
Mhm.
example. It's hard at first, but as you start losing weight, there starts to be you start
Right.
feeling a little better, maybe a
Right.
little more energy. So,
Right.
that kind of thing.
It's true.
Yeah. So I don't know
Yeah.
if you want to ask
So
a
where do we
question.
go from there?
Yeah. I just want to give some thoughts beyond having to cook. Just about the cooking real quick. I learned about the benefits of raw milk sometime in my children's childhood, but raw milk was illegal in Colorado. We didn't have the herd share. I had no idea where to get it. I was upset because I realized this is what we need, to be healthier. I didn't know if I could afford it either. It is more expensive. And so I was getting anxious about it, right? Uptight about it. And I knew I should buy eggs direct from a farmer, and I couldn't, I didn't know where to do that, or I couldn't afford it.
Right.
And I finally realized what took me out of that nasty spot was, you know what? If we really need this, God can provide it,
Yeah.
In time. And I'm just going to not worry about it
Mhm.
until that opportunity comes. And one after another, these opportunities I learned about who had raw milk despite it being illegal.
Mhm.
I don't know how, it just happened. I found somebody later who had eggs, and found about a farmer. And then I heard about Weston Price. And so all that, we didn't have perfect food growing up. And
Your kids didn't either.
no,
Yeah.
no. But one more comment about food. My boys, when they were in high school, they were both kind of ripped. You know what I'm saying? Like they had really good muscle definition,
Yeah.
but they were absolute computer jockeys. I mean, they were not playing sports.
Yeah.
We played volleyball once in a while, but they never did much intensively. They did jump on a trampoline, which does help.
Yeah.
But I mean, no
but
organized
not weightlifting. They're not weightlifting.
No, not at all. They were lazy. I mean, God bless them. They're wonderful, but they were not like doing push-ups. As far as I know, I never heard about it. So I asked them one day. I said, "What's going on? How come you guys are so ripped? I don't get it. You can have a six-pack. What the heck?" And they're like, preening just a little bit, but they said, "Well, it's because of the food you feed us, Mom." I said, "What?" But because I said your friends look kind of doughy for their age. They don't have good definition. Even some of the athletes, and they said it's because of what you feed us. And I thought they were wrong, but wow. Sally Fallon said something about muscle tone and vitamin D. I think it was vitamin D.
I think so.
So I'm just passing it along for anyone.
Well, and no, I mean, I actually talked to someone today, and he is an athlete. He does a lot of things. And we were talking about that, and he was a little not convinced about the food I was recommending. And I had him feel his own muscle definition. And then I had him feel my muscle definition and the strength of the muscle fibers because of the protein and vitamin D. And I was more defined than him. And I was like, do you know what kind of weightlifting I do? My dog pulls me on his leash. Like, I don't do it. And I have more definition than he did in weightlifting and doing, other athletic things. And that is because of the food.
Wow.
And that I discovered doing GAPS diet early on because I used to do CrossFit. And then I did GAPS for a year. And then I went to the gym for fun and deadlifted 75% my PR, not having touched a deadlift in a year. I deadlifted 75% of my PR.
She's still young too. Just
no, but it had nothing to do with working out or endurance. And I worked so hard for my muscle definition, and my joints were getting injured. Right. And then I just started eating well, and I have the strength to do what I need to do.
That's cool.
And if you talk to Ben Greenfield or other athletes, that's there. So anyway, sidebar, but food is important. And this is for your teenage boys. and this is why I bring it up all the time, and actually do that thing, which is a little bit weird because I'm having their moms are almost always there, but having them feel the definition and go, I have what you want because I'm eating the way that I'm telling you to eat. And for those of you who have older teenage boys, super helpful for that motivation. They need to decide they're doing this. You're never going to make them do anything, right? But they want that. It's very important to them in lots of ways, I think innately and other ways, to be strong and capable and have that defined body in ways I don't understand as a woman.
Right.
But I understand because I talk to lots of boys, or
that's
young
so
men.
Yeah.
And so if that's your way in, if you are listening and you have teenage or soon will have teenage boys, it's important for to young boys to grow and be strong.
Yes.
And that this food gets them there. That's why guys will do anything and they'll drink those disgusting protein shakes because they think they're going to get something that it's important to them. So anyway, there's, little kids, it's a lot easier to say, I'm sorry, this is what we're eating today. Right. Teenage boys, you have to have deeper conversations. So
yes.
A little off topic, but kind of not. So sorry.
No, not at all. I that's fun to get that. Yeah. My boys were right.
They were right.
I will tell them
they were definitely right. Yes.
So I just want to, I guess, close with a few
some
comments,
some wisdom. There's the background. There's what we're going, and I love the idea that you're talking about making it a habit. Because I want to expand
a hobby
that.
Is what
a hobby.
I said,
Sorry,
a
hobby. That's what I meant. I was like, that's the wrong word. And that's what I'll take a Saturday morning and go do a cattail bob thing. Sometimes he's in Colorado Springs. I haven't driven there, but I know people who do, right? And you could definitely make this a hobby. There's so many blogs about wild edible things, books about it. It's so fun to just practice. And so I just take my book out often and just practice looking, can I define what this is?
And you can start real simple if you think in the herbs, like the homeopathy, you buy a kit of a bunch of remedies and you buy a book and then you just look up whatever's troubling you. With the herbs, I tell people start with echinacea. You can plant it in your yard.
Yeah.
And it's a xeriscape. It needs it's not a desert xeriscape, but it doesn't need a lot of water. And you'll always have enough. It self-seeds. And you just dig up a root in about a couple weeks. Usually around the end of October is when I dig it up and make a tincture out of it. So maybe we'll do that.
Yeah, I asked her if she would come do a live in person tincture class.
Not hard,
so cool.
but it's fun to see how to do it. It really helps, take away.
So in closing, just my main selfish goal of bringing you here is to help bring in that lost wisdom, but not just the wisdom, but really not the knowledge of things, right? Because you can read those in books, you can learn those, and it's great, and it's good to learn that. But the wisdom that you've already brought some of, what kind of rates of autism did you see?
Right.
Growing up, the difference between a mom who's freaked out and moms who aren't freaked out, and how that affects us as kids who are learning from our parents what's scary and what's not, right? And so what a great thing. So what other words of wisdom or like thoughts or thought-provoking things did you want to end with?
Just I'd say be patient with yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. Most of them aren't fatal. Very few are.
Don't eat hemlock. Make sure that you harvest the right plant.
Right. But. I can look back on my life now and see how much I learned. And it just takes time, and you have time. Start with one thing, and whatever comes to your hand, even, whatever's most obvious.
And just that idea that when it's the right time, it'll be there. So just be opening for that, and don't be freaking out about things that it's not time yet.
Right. You do what you can. We just didn't have enough money for me to get raw milk, let alone I didn't know where it was. But we had money later, and that's when we did it, Avoid toxins. I mean, toxins are a big problem. And that's why the whole vaccine thing is a big deal. And again, our decision about vaccinating our children was very much of a faith-based, similar to where they were born. I heard about problems. I had an idea about how the immune system worked, and respected that. and didn't want to interfere with that more than I had to.
Mhm.
Like some of these childhood illnesses actually set you up well for life.
Yeah.
So, but I still had a fear of the disease.
Uh-huh.
So it came down to, okay, God, who should I trust, you or man? You know, in other words, if we give the vaccine and we end up with an injury, I'm gonna blame myself.
Mhm.
Okay, that's just the way it's gonna be because I did this to you. I allowed this to happen. If you come down with the disease and you're injured for life, which does happen,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm. Yep.
then I will feel more like that's something that God allowed to happen. I'm not saying that's a necessarily
Right.
rational way to look at it, but that's how I
Right.
made peace with it.
Right. It's where your faith landed you.
Right.
And
You may God may lead you on a different path because every family is different. He knows what's best for your family.
Right.
Your intuition will play into this, right? If
Mhm.
you trust your intuition, mama, you know, I am amazed how many mothers and some fathers really have insight into what's best for their
Yeah.
family. So if you're not feeling comfortable, wait. Just wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be pressured. Don't let someone pressure you. Like, make sure you're going forward because you really are okay with it, whatever that decision is.
Yeah.
Same with birthing. You know, like I birthed at home. That doesn't mean everybody should. But I would say if you're going to birth in the hospital, get a good doula. That's, you know, I will say that. We could talk about that some other time.
Well, my just fast story on that. My mom wanted to do a home birth. She's very crunchy before it was cool.
Crunchy is right. She's like me.
She made her own baby food and probably cost wise and just ease and all that. But she wanted to have a home birth and she didn't. And my mom has 9 kids. I'm oldest of 9.
Wow.
And my sister, that's 5th or 6th, 5th, I think. It's a lot. Anyway, quite a lot ways down the line was born with pneumonia and was airlifted to Children's Hospital. The doctor who treated her had lost a baby 2 weeks ago to the same diagnosis. And she survived because of that. And then the doors just opened wide open, and my mom had the last 3 kids. Well, last 2 kids at home, and then Autumn didn't. But she really felt like it was fine, but she would never have stopped to say, that's weird. Why would I have this baby in a hospital when I've had the other ones at home? So she felt like God prevented her from having home births until my sister was born, and then went, okay, great. Right. And so God knows what's best for us, and he knows how well we're going to listen and what we'll understand or what we'll think through or what's going to happen. And my sister is alive because my mom did not push trying to do a home birth because that's what she wanted to do. She just said, God's closed the doors. I'm just going to stay in the hospital.
That's a cool story.
And then as soon as she was born for the next baby, God just literally was like, go home, right? Be at home.
And I would, and to anyone who's faith-based, you know, however that works for you, certainly consult that. Anytime you have a health issue or health concern, consult God or wherever you're inclined, because what's the point if you can't get guidance?
Right. True.
I don't know. That's just, I don't mean to make light of any of that. My husband talks a lot about, and I really appreciate this perspective he has. I think he's a natural healer type. I'm very fortunate to be married to someone like that. Most men are not. I mean, but he really, people call him Dr. Don, you know, that's when he worked with a lot of people. Dr. Don, I feel bad. What you got to do something for me, they'd say, you know. But he just has this sense of, well, again, as believers in God, we believe that God designed what we see, the creation and our bodies, including our bodies, and that modern science has lost its touch with that. You know, it's all about slamming the body. Does that make sense? We slam it with this medication and then slam it back this way a little bit, and then now adjust it this way, or cut out this because it's not so good.
Right.
And there are times when that's necessary. Don't get me wrong. And I have a lot of respect for healthcare practitioners. They saved my life, you know, one time. So none of what I'm saying is meant to be disrespectful. But I think they're out of touch on some levels, and moms and dads can be more in touch with their own children,
right?
You know, helping them, and never let yourselves. Well, try not to let yourself be intimidated, you know, by the healthcare system. You know something's wrong with your kid, or not. Like, no, he's fine. Or it's just, you know, he'll be okay. So as I like to say, how did the human race make it to the 20th century, without modern science, like modern medicine, right? I mean, we made it. There must be some wisdom, some things that can be done without a hospital or a doctor appointment.
Yeah.
To me, a great red flag is fear. It can be important, an important notifier of a situation, but you need
that's all it is a notifier.
Right.
It should never be a decision maker or a driver, or should just notify you something. Look at this.
Yeah.
Like there's something here you need to look at more.
Right. So just in closing, one other tip I'll give is just cultivate a relationship with an older mom. She only has to be a few years older. It doesn't have to be a grandma, but if you have one, great. If she, gets what we're talking about. But if not, then look for one, pray for one, see who comes along, and maybe you'll find one online. I don't know. There are different ways.
Yeah.
But that really helped me a lot, was having that girlfriend who was a few years in front of me. So because I didn't have that. My mom was certainly not a problem in this area, but she didn't have a lot of advice. So
that's really a nice thought, that it doesn't have to be someone a whole generation.
Right.
It could just be someone whose kids are 3 or 4 years older. And it's true, because when you have your first kid and someone has their third, they're going to have a lot more calmness. Not everyone, right? But in general,
you look for the one who does.
Look for the one that does, right? And they're going to be calm, and it's fine, and too far away from your heart to kill you, and that's going to help give you perspective that the internet will not give you.
Right. No,
the internet will not give you perspective that it's going to be okay.
Oh no! In fact, it seems according to one of my daughter, actually, it specializes in the most alarmist. Things that hardly ever happen is this could happen. You're like, oh my gosh.
Shortness of breath could be a sign of cancer,
right? Or whatever.
Maybe you just have a cough, like or you got a cold. I don't know. So great. All right. I'm just going to talk for a second. If anyone has questions, type them in the chat. There's just lots of nice comments for you. And on the afterwards, you can put questions in the comments of YouTube. And there's ones for Nancy specifically. I will reach out to her and get answers from her. But we'll get the books. I'll get the books typed up in the description here. Questions take a second to come, and you have to type them. So I'm going to talk for 45 more seconds, and then we'll say goodbye. Thank you for coming. That was so great.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I mean, we just hang out and drink tea. So this was the best evening ever.
Amy's one of my favorite persons to hang out with. So how could I say no? I mean,
yay. Yes. Got her in the middle of a very busy season. So I'm so thankful that she took the time to come with us and be here and share wisdom and thoughts and learnings.
Encouragement, I hope.
Encouragement,
which means giving courage. And courage means to go, bring courage. We all need it. It is a scary time, very confusing. So don't get on yourself if you're struggling. I hope nothing I said made you feel bad that way. That's not my intention.
But I love just the idea of we have some time. There's working moms here. There are busy moms. You might have triplets. I don't know. Right. Woo. But we have some time, right? There's some time that there is. I know a mom friend who she reads books on her phone when she's breastfeeding in the middle of the night with her newborn, right? And just finding that time and giving yourself grace to enjoy. I'm joking with The Bachelor, right? Or whatever show, but also do other things that are fun. And reading books like this or walking in the woods and looking at plants can be so fun.
Oh, totally. It's really fun.
Yes.
Yes,
it is. Cool. Well, I don't see any questions coming in. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for being here. And we will see you in 2 weeks for teaching about science. We're going to learn about science. We're going to remember our 4th grade health and 6th grade scientific process method stuff. So cool.